We both know that we need to manage our money consistently, right? But why don't we do it? Today, we are re-listening to an episode that we did talking about managing our money consistently and why we don't budget consistently, even though we know that we should. So let's take a listen. Logically, you should have a budget and budget consistently, right? Right. But do you do it on a regular basis? For most, I see it's not actually happening. Why is that? Why do we not do what we know we need to? And how do you get past this so you can create those unstoppable finances you dream of? In today's episode, I'm sharing 5 strategies that you need to embrace to move forward consistently without fear, overwhelm, or stress. You can do this and we can do it together. Welcome back. We're talking about budgeting today and why you're not budgeting consistently, even though you know that you should be budgeting, right? So, the first thing that I see come up that like why you're not budgeting consistently is because you're tracking expenses. So you kind of feel like you kind of got it covered. You kind of know what's going on, right? But tracking your expenses is not budgeting. Budgeting is proactive. Tracking expenses is a part of your budget, but it's done reactionary. It's done after the fact. When we're budgeting, we're proactive. So if you're just tracking expenses, you're on the right step or on the right track, but you're not quite there yet. Okay. The second thing that I see hold ambitious women just like you back with budgeting, even though you know you should, is overwhelm. We know there is a lot that goes on, and there can be a lot of pressure within your finances. So, get it right. It can feel overwhelming to try and get started. That hardest part of anything that we do is that very first beginning part. And when it feels overwhelming, we end up finding something else to do. So we're not working on the thing that we need to because it kind of got scary and overwhelming, and then we just go do something else. Again, if that's you, that's perfectly fine. Obviously, we want to improve, but there's nothing we can do about what was done in the past. So there's no point in beating yourself up over it. The third thing that I see come up that keeps people from budgeting, even though we know that we should be budgeting, is guilt and overwhelm. So if you're feeling guilty or if you're overwhelmed about what you're spending money on, you're not going to keep doing it because we don't want to face that. So, there's no guilt, there's no judgment, there's no shame. It's your money, your life, right? You get to spend money on what you prioritize. These things that are important to you. Like, there's a reason for that, right? And there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with quote unquote, air quotes here, mistakes that you've made on the past. There's no guilt, there's no judgment. But often we put that on ourselves because we feel we should have done better. That's fine. It is what it is. We just have to move forward. So if you're feeling guilt, if you're feeling judgment, and that's why you're not moving forward in your finances, why you're not budgeting consistently, again, there's no use in beating ourselves up over it, but we can move forward. And I'm going to share resource with you here in just a minute when we get to the end. Okay. The fourth thing that I see come up when like why you're not budgeting, even though you know you need to be budgeting, is you feel like budgeting is just to pay the bills. Like I pay the bills, so we have a budget, or we're good, or there's not we'll get to that in a second, but we're budgeting just to pay the bills. Again, that's not budgeting. Budgeting is setting the intention of what you want to happen with your money. So if you're not setting the intention, somebody else will. And we've talked about this several times. Like, you have to set the intention of what you want to happen with your money. So if you're just tracking expenses or you're just paying the bills, you're not budgeting. You're just doing the minimum that you need to get by. And we often can coast by on that because the bare minimum that we need to get done is getting done. But that's not the way that we create abundance. Not the way that you create that confidence. That's not the way that you create the wealth. That's not the way that you create those strategic systems that are the best way to have that long-term financial success. We can't just get by. Which brings me to the fifth thing that I see come up while you're not budgeting, even though you know that you need to. It feels like you're under earning, like you don't make enough. Maybe it was barely enough to get by. Maybe it's not enough to get by. Like, we've been there, done that. Again, no guilt, no judgment. If you're in that space, it doesn't feel like it makes a difference. And it can bring up overwhelm. It can bring up guilt. It can bring up judgment when you try and do these things and there's not enough there. I get it. But that's when it's probably most important to actually budget and to actually budget consistently when you're in those tough times. And there's ways that we can do that. And there's ways that you can set that up to help remove some of the overwhelm, the guilt, the judgment, all those things that you're feeling, because it doesn't have to be that way. Those strategic systems that we can put in place to create that long-term financial abundance that you're looking for, it starts now. It's not the one day thing. We don't have to figure something else out first. We have to make this step now. We talked about 5 things that you might be doing. Even though we know that we need to budget consistently. So the first one was you could be just tracking your expenses instead of actually budgeting. The second one, we can be getting stuck in overwhelm land. The third, we're not budgeting because of guilt or judgment coming up. The fourth one was we're not really budgeting. We're just paying the bills. So you might feel like we're budgeting, but we're not really setting the intention beyond making sure the bills are paid. And then the fifth one was if you are under earning and you don't feel like it's going to make a difference. So we're not budgeting there. All right. You made it your challenge this time, though. I want to hear, what is your preference when it comes to managing your money? Are you a pen and paper person or electronic? Either way can be systematized. So I can't wait to hear. Send me a message on Instagram at Aimee Cerka. Send me a message on Instagram at Aimee Cerka or shoot me a text 817-969-4653. We'll see you next time. Bye for now. Thank you so much for listening to the Your Money, Your Life podcast. Wondering what's next? When you're ready, there are different levels of support that you can use on the path to creating unstoppable finances and your unstoppable life. After all, your finances are unique and your support should be too. Ultimately, we'll create a customized plan to ditch financial struggle for good that works for you, your goals, your priorities, your life. Go to workwithaimee.com to get started with one of our most popular programs, or you can book a Q&A call with me and we'll figure out what your next step should be.